Most of the people groups still unreached by the gospel live in places stretching 10 degrees latitude to 40 degrees latitude north of the equator. 2/3 of the world's population, more than 3.2 billion souls, live in this 1040 window. 95% of the people living in this 1040 window are unevangelized. Many have never heard the gospel message even once. God so loved all the world that He sent His Son, Jesus, so that the world through Him might be saved. Yet, currently, only 1% of Christian missions giving is going to mission work in the 1040 window, and cross-cultural evangelism is at a historical low. Are we, the Church of Jesus Christ, responsible to turn this around? What is God's plan, God's strategy, God's will for the nations? Today on Continuum, we are looking at the Great Commission from God's perspective, discovering His heart for the nations of the world. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through Him all things were made. Without Him nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. The earth is the Lord's, and everything in it, the world and all who live in it. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance.
When we consider giving our lives to serve God and sharing really a vision for our viewers and our partners to really serve God and to tie in there with the Great Commission, you know, I think the true understanding of what God has called us to do comes back to His perspective on the world. And what we want to challenge you with today is to look at the Great Commission from God's perspective rather than from our own. And if we start way back at the beginning in Psalm 2, he has this prophetic verse here where he says that, I will declare a decree. The Lord has said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will give you the nations for your inheritance and the ends of the earth for your possession.
That's quite a promise, actually.
Well, it is, and it really kind of reveals to us God's heart, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He's thinking, okay, I'm sending Jesus to the world. What for? For the nations. And you know, you and I believe that He sent Jesus for us.
Yes.
And that's sweet of Him. It's good of Him to do that. But the fact is, from His perspective, it's a lot bigger than that.
Yes.
And that's what we want to talk about today. You know, I can remember years ago when we first started studying missions, and we studied some of the old resistances to missions in the old denominations, you know, and people would say things like, well, if God wanted the heathen saved, He would go and save them Himself, you know, and things like that. But does God want the heathen saved?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, that's what we're saying here, right? I mean, He wants the nations for His inheritance. This is His promise to Jesus. I think that's what it comes down to. God has His own purpose already decided. And what we need to do is tie in with that and say, okay, God, I'm going to run with you on this one. And I'm not going to set the strategies. I'm going to let you do that. I'm not going to make the, you know, the whole promise, the whole idea. God's already done that. And the earth belongs to Him.
It belongs to Him. It says in the Gospel of John, it said, I like the first part, from 1 to 5, it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and He was always there. It says, all things were made by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. But it's interesting in verse 5 it says, and the light shines on the darkness, but the darkness can't comprehend it. And so, you know, God's heart, when you look at this, God has made everything. He has created. He created you. He created me. And to have that passion that Jesus has for the nations is what keeps us going.
That's
it's
right.
for His glory,
that's
for
right.
Him.
And I think that's the foundation, isn't it? Of where our perspective needs to be coming from. You know, I've heard people say a lot of things like that. You know, well, you know, we got lots of people at home that need your help. Why don't you just stay here?
And we do.
Yeah, and we do. Absolutely, we do.
Yeah.
And you know, people say, well, you know, you got to let the nationals reach their own nations and all of those kind of things. But really, if we want to have God's perspective, He doesn't see the color of our skin. That's not what He's talking about. He's not talking about dividing everybody up. The nations are already divided up.
Yes.
And He wants them all.
Yeah. When you look at the scriptures, it says when Jesus saw the multitude, He was moved with compassion.
Yeah.
It's that love that He has for what He had created, and He's compelling them to come back to Him.
That's right.
I remember when I first got saved, I had such a love for the Lord, and it's something that I don't ever want to go out. And when you have that love for the Creator, for what He's done for you, there's such appreciation. It's like everything you want to do, you want Him to be glorified.
Yeah, that's right.
Including reaching the nations.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about, isn't it? Backing up and saying, God, we're doing this because this is what you want.
Yeah.
It's not because we feel sorry for the lost. We know they need salvation.
Yeah.
It's not because we feel sorry for the poor.
Yeah.
We'll never feed all the poor. But those are really fruits of us having the right perspective. And when we have the right perspective, I believe that we can do it more powerfully.
Yes.
And so what we're talking about today is connecting with the power of God for our lives. Why is it that we need to preach the gospel? Why is it that we need to minister to the nations? It goes beyond our families. It goes beyond our local churches. Our families and our churches exist because of the purpose of God, for the purpose of God. And I think, you know, as we turn everything into that perspective, say, okay, God, here's what your perspective is. You love the nations. You want these guys saved. In Psalm 22 here it says, all the ends of the world shall remember and turn to the Lord. And that's going to be the grand finale as well. All the ends of the world are going to turn to the Lord. God has a great commission that He is going to fulfill.
My husband and I, we got married 3.5 years ago or so. And I knew I'd married a guy that had been, you know, on the mission field or grew up, at least somewhat on the mission field. His parents were missionaries, of course. You know, we had thought about buying a house. We had sailor right away, so we kind of started a family, and just, you kind of want what everybody else wants that you're friends with, right? I remember Gabe's parents would talk to me, you know, like, I think y'all are really called to the mission field, you know, called to do what we do or somewhat what we do, and I just wasn't sure. I remember like complaining, like, that's not going to work, you know, how are we going to have money? How am I going to have all my kids? You know, that was a big question was. But I went to Gabe's parents one day and I said, you know, like, you guys, you had 3 sons before you ever left to go on the mission field. You know, so I have to have all my kids too. If you had 3 sons before you ever left, that means I need to at least get some more out and then go, which might not be till my late 20s or something. But you know, they said, and it was something that really changed me. They said, no, we did not go on the mission field after we had 3 kids. We went when God told us to go. You know, and so that worked in my heart some more. And it was a struggle too, because we weren't sure, you know, how our church was going to take it. They ended up being fine, and they were totally gracious and sent us out, you know, and support us completely. But we just weren't sure, you know, like, are they going to let us go? Have we done enough to be able to be sent out? You know, what is it? And it was just another thing that we were questioning God, like, are you sure, God? Because we can't go and not be sure, right? We can't go unless we're solid that we have a word that you gave us, that we are actually breathing every day that word, right? And that we prayed and prayed, and we were just struggling back and forth. And one morning, we were both reading our Bibles, Gabe and I, and we really had been crying out for God to give us a solid word, right? He spoke to me in particular through Psalm 67, that I even wrote on my Bible. It says, our calling on it. May God be merciful and bless us. May His face shine with favor upon us. May your ways be known throughout the earth, your saving power among people everywhere. May the nations praise you, O God. Yes, may all the nations praise you. How glad the nations will be, singing for joy, because you govern them with justice and you direct the actions of the whole world. May the nations praise you, O God. Yes, may all the nations praise you. Then the earth will yield its harvest.